So Russian trains and oil refineries are again burning this morning following a series of Ukrainian long-range drone strikes last night. Diving into what we know, some reporting here from the Kyiv Post, along with some footage of these strikes. They said on Tuesday, August 19th, Ukrainian drones blew up a train hauling at least 30 fuel cars, torching 9 of them immediately and igniting a blaze visible from space. Attacking aircraft first stopped the train's locomotive. Later, drones blew up individual fuel cars, according to reports. So this was a set attack. It wasn't one drone flying by, happened to see a train, and went for it. If they're finding a way to stop the train and then massing resources, it means that they were expecting this. This was a very deliberate operation. According to both Russian and Ukrainian reports, traffic on the rail line in both directions was at a complete halt. And then Ukrainian government official Petro Andrushenko said, quote, "The train has derailed and is now being finished off by anything that can fly. It's burning beautifully. The Ukrainian Defense Forces in Zaporizhia are once again reducing Russian logistics to zero, and it looks just epic from the ground." And no doubt, pretty big fire. Imagine that. When fuel cars get hit with explosive drones, it turns into a pretty significant blaze. Even with those fuel cars out, there's going to probably be some pretty significant damage to the tracks, given the size of that fire. So this might be a medium to long-term impact by the Ukrainian forces on Russian logistics. But it wasn't just the train. There were a couple of oil refineries hit overnight as well, one in Ukraine and one in Russia. Continuing on with the Ukrainian strikes here, about 6 hours before this train went up in smoke, there was another drone attack against a Russian oil refinery in Volgograd, some 450 kilometers or 280 miles inside of Russian territory. This is the second time that this facility has been hit, this particular facility, in 5 days, and we're going to gloss past this, but it is crazy that here we are, and it's not even going to be like the top news item, that Ukraine is effectively striking targets 450 kilometers inside of Russia. That is hard to have imagined even like a year and a half ago, let alone at the beginning of the conflict. And this is a pretty regular occurrence. There you go. 2 times in 5 days, this specific refinery has been hit. But no worries. From the Russian side here, the Volgograd governor, Bocharov, said, quote, that Ukrainian drones had attempted an attack on the refinery, but they'd all been shot down by local air defense forces, and, quote, falling debris damaged and set fire to a roof of a refinery building being used as a hospital. So all of the drones were intercepted, nothing to see here, and it definitely is not a refinery that's on fire there. That's the hospital building inside of the Classic in a lot of ways, right? Now, real quick, I owe you all a fundraiser update. We're picking up funds for the Azov International Battalion right now. We're at $60,000 out of a $100,000 goal because you all are insane. We're like less than a week in. We're probably going to hit that goal pretty soon. We're picking up night vision goggles, thermals, comms equipment, drones, and more for these guys. As a part of this, we've been able to have access to some of the soldiers in the Azov International Battalion to talk about the work that they do and some background on the organization itself. Just a couple days ago, we were able to talk with Uno, an assault platoon commander in Vegas, who you might know as Different Breed TV here on YouTube, combat medic, talking about what was probably happening north of Pokrovsk. And this was right in the middle of that whole situation where the Russians were breaking through, or they weren't, and Azov themselves were sent down there to help bottle this up. So pretty unique that we have that access to talk to those guys in real time. And then just earlier today, put out a second interview also with Uno and Vegas, talking about some background of the organization, why they chose Azov, given, the controversy that unit brings up from time to time, the capabilities of the unit, the tactics, planning operations, and so on. We also talked with a couple drone operators. That interview is set to come up here in a couple days, but making incredible progress. Thank you all so much for your incredible generosity. It's humbling every time we see this. If able and interested, the link to contribute will be in the pinned comment and description below. Now, I mentioned that it was not just Ukrainian strikes that were taking place overnight. Russia also carried out a pretty significant attack against the Kremenchug oil refinery in Ukraine. We've got a couple different looks here at how this played out. This does not appear to be, when looking at the Ukrainian strike in Russia, it looks like 1, maybe 2 drones got through. The Kremenchug refinery in Ukraine was the target of a concerted attack. There's reports of as many as 30 munitions being utilized against this one location. Also reports, unconfirmed from what I can tell at this point, that it was hit by missiles and drones. So this was not just a target of opportunity. This was a serious, focused effort in Russian strikes overnight, and we can see that the damage this morning with it appears, as of this reporting, that fire is still burning. Now, we also got some interesting news from Russian mill blogger 2 Majors here I want to dive into before we shift over to some battlefield updates, specifically talking about what he says was a reconnaissance and sabotage operation by Ukrainians that was foiled in Bryansk. And there's some of this doesn't quite sound right. We're going to go over it. He says a Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group was discovered and eliminated in the Bryansk region 40 kilometers from the state border. 3 were killed, 3 surrendered, including the commander. They plan to blow up a major railway junction and take a series of photos for another round of internet victories. According to him, he and his team crossed the border with the Russian Federation about 7 days ago. They traveled 40 kilometers heading towards a major railway junction with the aim of blowing it up. They were found to have almost 10 kilograms of explosives, 7 grenades, Garmin devices, AR-15s with silencers, and so on and so forth. And they did post pictures of a couple of the deceased here and the equipment that they gathered. The things that sound a little bit off to me here is 40 kilometers inside of Russian territory is within drone range in a lot of places. So if you're going after a railway junction, why send in 6 people on foot to plant, again here, 10 kilograms of explosives? A couple drones would be able to bring that to bear, especially some of the longer range drones. That's a little bit off. Also, that the commander was so quickly captured and immediately just opened up and started telling everything doesn't quite sound right. Usually it takes a while to get that type of information. Here it comes across as though he was detained and immediately was like, let me just tell you guys what we were up to, where we were headed. This was the goal of the operation. That sounds a little bit off. Either way, we're like, this was very initial reports, so we're likely to get more information about this in the coming days. But again, according to Russian sources, they intercepted a Ukrainian sabotage team in Bryansk. Now, I do want to turn back to some battlefield updates here, specifically looking down near Pokrovsk. This has been a focus area in recent weeks, as we've seen, pulling this up here, the move where Russian forces were able to infiltrate through Ukrainian lines. We've made a lot of videos about this recently. And over the course of the last couple days, Ukraine has deployed forces down to that region and kind of pushed them back. It has largely been silent on the Russian side of things, but we are starting to get a few reports that are a bit contradictory from their perspective. I thought it was worth running through those here. Now, starting on the Ukrainian side of this assessment, we've gotten the only footage, the only visual confirmation we have out of this entire pocket is from Ukraine, and it's of Ukraine showing the elimination and the capture of Russian soldiers. We haven't seen anything that I've come across from the Russian perspective, not even like a recon drone from a distance viewing, a flag planting in one of these areas. But we have analysts here apply for over on X and Telegram, whose information will be in the description below. Said more information about the trapped Russians, according to my information. There seems to be quite a lot there. So talking about these 2 pockets right here, that this has been the same since that initial Ukrainian push back into the area. He says the forces sent to Zolotai Koledyaz slowly retreated inwards towards the cauldron and are now all concentrated in this forest. So some area of woodline here, talking about tens of tens, so less than 100, maybe 20, 30, 40, something like that. He said right now the Ukrainians are shelling them with MLRS, multiple launch rockets. For now, they're inside some old trenches, so it's difficult to directly dislodge them. So to save as much manpower as possible, the Ukrainians are not planning to conduct a clearing operation, but rather let them starve to death because of lack of food and water. That's not crazy. We talked about this right when this operation kicked off, was the Russians were able to move in here quickly enough to where they fell in on some Ukrainian defensive positions that had been built as a secondary or tertiary line of defense should Ukraine need to fall back further from Pokrovsk. It's not perfect, and there's definitely not a ton of Russian soldiers there, but you can imagine they get down in some of those bunkers, the clearance operations could be pretty costly for Ukraine. So the assessment from this one analyst, we'll see if it plays out, is, hey, they're cut off, they're completely surrounded, we'll just wait. And it wouldn't be that hard, depending on what they'd be able to scavenge here, because we know that the primary means of resupply is via drone. So especially if Ukraine has forces to their south, they do have a pretty reasonable chance of intercepting those drones. And if that's the only way these guys are getting food and water, ammunition and batteries, they're probably going to be seriously considering surrendering sometime soon. Now, we did get a bit of a different perspective here. We're starting to see Russian channels actually talk about this, which the craziest thing here was right when this breakout happened, we had the Russian botnets across social media just go crazy. This is the breakthrough. The entire Ukrainian line is in full collapse. And again, to go back and cite Uno and Vegas in that interview, you can kind of get a vibe, an idea from them of what the actual concern was here. And it was not that the lines were collapsing. It was just kind of showing a challenge they have all along the front and that this is actually pretty normal. Just the extent of this penetration was what stood out. Either way, there's a lot of commentary of this is it, the beginning of the end, so on and so forth. And then Russian channels just went quiet and stopped reporting about this at all. We're starting to see a little bit more mention in some Russian media. Paratrooper's diary right here said, quote, our assault groups bypassed the settlement of Kucherov Yar from the right flank and reached its outskirts from the northeast. So he's talking about this pocket here, where supposedly it does look like Russian forces are cut off. He's talking about capturing this village. He says from Kucherov Yar to Vesely, up here to the north, our troops managed to take control of the ravine which connects the two settlements. Movements of our troops were also noted in Vesely. In the central part of the village, the fighters of the Russian armed forces secured the southeastern portion. So very conflicting at this point. Not only is Russia talking about this area again, but they're actually saying they are on the verge of capturing this area, and they're moving up here to the north in a section that Ukraine says that they cleared multiple days ago, or quite a few days ago. Now, a lot of attention, understandably so, being focused on the Pokrovsk sector right now. It is kind of the priority Russian sector, but there's a couple other areas I want to hit on here real quick. Down near Zaporizhia, we are seeing Russia continuing to focus some forces on this attack north of Plavny. Stepnorisk, they're continuing to say they're on the outskirts, they're not on the outskirts. There's definitely been an increase in attacks over here, which is a bit of an interesting sector as they have the left flank tied up here with the water, the Dnipro. So it's definitely going to be a little bit different of a fight there than we see elsewhere. But shifting up north, of course, some around Chasiv Yar, nothing crazy. But going up here near Kharkiv to the northern portion of kind of the eastern front, there's actually appears to be a bit of an uptick in Russian offensive operations here in recent days. Not a lot of progress in terms of changing territorial control. I mean, you can go back quite a while before you see any change here on Deep State map. But according to some sources, it does look like the fighting has intensified, especially over here near Volchansk. This is according to another Russian mill blogger, Paratrooper's Diary. He says heavy fighting continues in the forest near Stelinkov. So zooming in here a little bit further, and you can see that settlement. So in this forest area here, the fighting has intensified. He says the enemy is putting up fierce resistance and occasionally launching counterattacks in Volchansk, this area here. The Russian armed forces advanced in the east of the city and on the left bank of the Volcha River. So just notable, again, nothing crazy in terms of territorial change of control. We do have a little bit of footage coming out of that fight. But when you're looking at the Russian channels, the thing that they're prioritizing right now are, again, first and foremost, Pokrovsk. They're talking more and more about Zaporizhia, and then we're starting to see some inclusions of Kharkiv. The area up here in Sumy is not getting much attention right now from Russia, which generally means that the front is relatively stagnant. They're not moving any further, and there have been increased reports of Ukrainian forces conducting local counterattacks. Nothing major, not retaking significant amounts of territory, but continuing to kind of poke and prod against the Russian lines in this area. But overall, that's a general look at the battlefield situation right now. A lot of the focus today, understandably so, continues to be on the peace talks last night between President Trump, a bunch of European leaders, and Ukrainian President Zelensky. There's a lot of kind of administrative, bureaucratic going on with that right now. We'll probably have an update on that by tomorrow morning. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.